Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Caddle, Season 5, Episode 3. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our special guest this week is our regular research and insight guest, Colleen Martin, from our friends at Caddle, joining us to share commissioned, proprietary, custom, you'll only hear it here, exclusive research. Is there another word for being special and exclusive?
That's right.
This month, we asked Caddle, through Caddle, over 9,000 Canadians what they really thought about grocery e-commerce. And as we discussed before, what's up with you? Why don't you do it more often?
It was before COVID, there was COVID, and there seems to be some confusion out there in terms of where is the industry going. Lots of chatter around how do you make money selling food online to, well, is there any growth opportunities? So I'm happy that Colleen will bring in some really neat, new, fresh data.
New, fresh data never heard before. Commissioned here. You'll hear it here.
Exactly.
First.
Exactly.
More great news. I just got off the phone with this fella. He had a bit of a funny accent. Boris or Vladimir. I don't know what his name was. I didn't quite catch it. He's offering us $500,000 a month for the podcast. Woohoo! All we need to do, seems pretty simple, is just say good things about Russian agriculture every now and then. And we also get a case of vodka each every month.
Just one?
I think it's on the up and up. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, of course, everyone, I'm joking, but this whole Russian influence buying, it's an asymmetrical war. They used to buy ads on Facebook. Now they give money, including a Quebecer I saw from your home province.
Yep.
I had no idea. It's $500,000.
Poutine.
That's what I'm worth. $500,000. Anyway, just crazy nonsense. Anyway,
I know.
A little fun with the Ruskies there.
From Russia to seeing people in Ohio eating cats. That's great.
Who's amplifying that story other than the Trump?
I know.
Oh my goodness, it's just so crazy. Just craziness. It's dangerous clownery is what I would call, because you and I have filters and kind of can look at different things. Not everyone looks at things the way we do. And it's dangerous clownery. I feel sorry for
I actually posted on X this morning that the claim was absolutely, ridiculous. And people actually argued.
Yes, that's right. They will argue. That's right.
Oh my God.
Yes, they will argue.
Yes.
Anyway,
stick to the Canada Food Guide.
Yeah.
Canada's Food Guide. There are no dogs. There are no cats.
When in doubt, stick to the food guide. It's not on the pyramid. All right, let's get into some of the news. I wanted to revisit a story that we talked about earlier in the year, because there's a big article in the Globe and Mail. I don't know if you saw it, about aquaculture in Norway. I don't know if you saw that. Yep. And it was quite an interesting story. Of course, it brought in some of the Canadian context, and I had no idea how big it was in Norway. Huge. They're struggling, and they listed the different countries. They're struggling with the same things a little bit, but they've got this new tech. Looks like a giant freight liner in the ocean. But it was interesting. What I wanted to ask you about is, I wanted if you could catch us up, because I think, and it was mentioned in the article, that the government was supposed to come out by July with some kind of framework or some kind of guidelines for aquaculture after making their decision to shut it down on the West Coast. Yeah. Any updates you might be able to share with us?
I don't believe there were any updates actually on aquaculture, and actually on the weekend I'm meeting with with the Seafood Alliance here in the Atlantic, but they're not necessarily about aquaculture. In fact, they actually hate aquaculture. They see it as competition. But in terms of aquaculture, I think there's some really there are regulatory gaps here. The solution right now is to shut down farms, because environmental groups are absolutely upset and they're concerned about sea lice, they're concerned about contamination. But often these groups don't appreciate that technologies do evolve. You do see new things happening, and Norway is faced with the same challenges, but they are embracing new technologies. Canada is a bit slow on that front for sure.
Well, I think one of the things we kind of agreed, and we talked to your great colleague, was Stephanie Colombo,
Stephanie
right?
Colombo, yeah,
one of the world's foremost aquaculture experts, and I mean, my conclusion from the conversations was that the industry is paying for some of the sins of the past, but as you say, technology moves forward. So, it's so vital to the First Nations.
But as you know,
economy.
Ottawa is a bit of a populist government, so they will listen to certain groups and they will act very quickly on issues without really, providing a long regulatory runway to the sector in terms of, okay, this is what we're doing, this is where we need to go, and look at solutions in a very objective manner. They tend to try to keep people quiet as quickly as possible. Now, that's kind of what's going on in BC, unfortunately.
Let's go from that to a somewhat related issue. When I think of populist, I think of the federal government, I think of sustainability. They kind of come for good or ill into my same kind of thought patterns, and some interesting statements from the CEO of JBS, and it's around sustainability and that consumers don't want to pay for it. Now, you'll hear we talk about a little bit with Colleen. We want to ask consumers ourselves about how they're willing, what their thoughts on sustainability and local. The challenge has always been in the research. You spoke to it very eloquently. Is there's a bias to answer, yes, of course, I want sustainability. Like, it's a tough one to research. But let's start with what the comments were from the CEO of JBS. And who is JBS for those listening?
Yeah, so first of all, JBS is one of the most important global meat packers in the world. They're out of Brazil. It's a huge conglomerate, and they do have facilities here in Canada. One of them is in Alberta. So there are 3 major federally licensed facilities to process beef, and one of them is owned by GBS. And so we kind of, and by the way, GBS actually a few years ago, I think it was last year, they were actually attacked. They were victim of a cyber attack, which was a big deal, and they actually paid the ransom, which was really a bit problematic. They did get a lot of criticism. But anyways, the CEO was actually talking this week. By the way, it's a private company like Cargill. So no one knows. It's a bit of a black box. Nobody really knows like what's going on there in terms of profits. And but I do believe that JBS is a highly profitable organization, as Cargill is as well. But he did say this week something really interesting about sustainability. And as you know, Michael, beef in particular is often pointed at as being an unsustainable source of protein because it requires a lot of water and grains to feed cattle. And a lot of people are actually accusing the beef industry, the cattle industry, of being unsustainable. And that's why in Canada we have the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, for example, since 2016 to try to come up with practices to make beef more sustainable and blah, blah, blah. And the CEO of GBS this week said, you know what? We can do a lot of things to make our industry more sustainable, but nobody's going to pay for that. No one at retail. And so he was basically claiming that sustainability has no market currency when it comes to food, especially when it comes to meat products, which I thought was interesting. I think it was the first CEO of a major company saying that. Because typically you would hear the CEO from McDonald's, the CEO from other companies saying, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to change. This is an opportunity to actually cater to a different market. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, you know what? People are looking for good deals, a good product, quality product, and that's it. So that's why I'm happy that we'll actually explore this with Colleen. But I think there's a bit of a change, there's a bit of a shift in the market because of inflation. I think people went back to their roots, and millennials, which have been hardly hit by inflation and high interest rates, they're recalibrating their values a little bit when it comes to buying food, I think. Were you surprised?
Well, I wasn't surprised because he sees it from his perspective, and again, the challenge is consumers say one thing and do another. That's not unusual, but it's particular for issues around sustainability. I guess what I'd like to think about is doing this same. We're going to do this survey. We'll talk about it next month, and then do it again next year. Like, we know that economics, affordability influences people's willingness to pay for these other things, right? Like
the questions will need to be formulated correctly and wisely, because as an academic, I am sick and tired of reading published papers in journals, academic journals, high-ranking journals, okay, using the willingness to pay or willingness to buy method in economics. And most of these studies are claiming that sustainability does have market currency, that people are willing to pay. And I've always disputed that. Are you sure? Because seriously, when I talk to people, when I talk to CEOs, that's not what they're seeing. And so I'm hoping that we'll actually get a better sense of what actually is happening post inflation storm, if you will.
Hey, I want to stay with meat processing for a second. Let's talk about what's going on in the States with this Boar's Head plant outbreak, this listeria outbreak that's happening in the States. I mean, it is just appalling. And I guess the good news is they were caught. But, if I compare that and their behavior to listeria outbreaks that we've talked about, they seem to be a bad actor, but they're massive, right? This board. What do you make of this, and why would they? Does it get back to like you got to be big to be good? Like, what do you make of this? What do you learn from it?
Yeah, no, it's some recalls in the U.S. are really nasty, to be honest, and that's certainly one of them. I haven't really looked deeply into what was going on with the recall, why it happened, how are they dealing with the recall and all that. But
it seems to be like a pattern, a constant pattern of just bad maintenance in their plants, like just very. Okay.
It reminded me of the XL Foods recall in 2012, to be honest, because that's the largest recall we've ever had in Canada in terms of volume, in terms of the amount of food that was recalled. I think it was 6 million kilos of meat or something like that. It was massive. But when you actually went to that plant, that is actually now owned by GBS, by the way, because the Kohler brothers actually sold the plant to GBS during the investigation after the recall. And when you actually visited that plant, you really quickly realized that corporate culture didn't really support rigor, food safety rigor. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Michael, right now with this particular case in the U.S. There seems to be some major failings around food safety culture.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Oh, yeah, now, you can lose it pretty quickly.
Well, anyway, we our thoughts go out to all the people impacted in the U.S. I think it was the market.
Many people actually. There were many fatalities.
Lots of deaths. Deaths and fatalities. Fortunately, it sounds like just in the U.S. So that's we don't have to worry about it, so to speak, in Canada. But
that's right.
Our thoughts go out, of course.
But food safety culture is so critical, and
culture. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that. I mean, I would say that most companies in Canada and the U.S. Take food safety very, very, very seriously. But with culture, things do shift. After a while, with the lack of training, the leadership within the organization will actually not prioritize food safety as much, like deliberately. You kind of really have to make it deliberate, deliberate effort.
Listen, that's an industry that's, we were talking last season about them hiring children to clean at night, in the night shift. So
that's right.
Let's take a quick exit ramp from that one and talk about, I noticed, I don't know if you saw, Beyond Meat is launching a steak alternative. So they have relaunched their product. I enjoy their burgers, actually. I buy them at Costco at frozen, and I enjoy them.
Yep.
But they're now launching.
I'm an Eve's fan, personally.
I find, I was an Eve's fan. They had a little breakfast sausage kind of thing that I really like. I find them a bit too dry. What do you think? Do you think, if it looks like a steak? I mean, it's funny. We talked about this in kind of the lab grown, but in this case, it's a plant-based steak. Would you imbibe?
Yeah, no, I mean, why not? I mean, I would try it for sure. I think that that Beyond Meat is at the stage of exploring new ideas. Again, it did disrupt the market almost 6 years ago now, and but we all know that they're struggling financially. They've right-sized basically. And now they're looking for new growth opportunities, I think. And this could be one of them. And frankly, let's face it. I mean, when it comes to beef, a lot of people are just appalled by prices. It's just, and if you want to at least have a shot at tasting the real thing, well, why not? I mean, why not actually buy one of those products? The problem is that I'm just hoping that price points won't be as high as other products we've seen from Beyond Meat.
You wrote an article, really interesting. I've been talking to retailers a lot about AI. We're 15 minutes into this conversation. We haven't said the words AI yet.
That's right. Exactly. There's no retail without AI.
Well, that's right. And I've been asking, is it underhyped, overhyped, just the right amount of hype? I was talking to the Walmart CTO on the Voice Retail podcast, and I asked her, if you were a baseball fan, what inning? And she says, we're in spring training. Like there's a lot more to happen with AI. Now, you wrote an article about AI and food, and I thought it was very intriguing. So lay out your thinking around AI and the food and I guess the food industry.
I must say, there's a new book that's out this week, and it's called Nexus. It's written by a historian called Yuval Noah Harari. He's written many books on the issue, and of course I'd say he's pro AI. Like he's always been a bit of a fan, but he's always registered his concerns around regulation and what do we do with AI. And he made a couple of comments in his book. He actually writes, for example, with the financial market, he claims that about 1% of the world population truly understands global financing. I think it's actually less than that, but he said 1%.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like a bigger number than I was thinking, but sure.
I know, but what he claims because of AI is that number is likely to go down to 0% because of AI, because AI is not just like the internet. The internet to him is a tool to share information. AI is an agent, an agent like stakeholders, like companies, changing the environment, making decisions, also impacting the world. And when I was actually reading the book, I immediately thought, of course, he doesn't talk much about food, but as you know, you and I, we are constantly think about food. Mm-hmm. And I think, well, is AI going to impact food system? I think the answer is yes, but will AI force people to disengage or get people to disengage? Will AI make us less food literate in a way? Because if we see this agent making all these decisions, running companies and doing all sorts of things, developing new flavors, new products, is engagement, which I think is a critical part of food systems, citizen engagement. Will engagement continue with AI as we move forward? And frankly, when it comes to policy, when it comes to strategy, you need people to remain involved. Look at what happened with the greedflation campaigns. They were highly successful because people don't understand food system. They don't understand food supply chains. So with AI, will this make people less knowledgeable? And this is I think it was a really important question that he was asking.
Interesting. I
what do you think? I know you've been looking at AI for a very long time.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it in that way. I was looking at it as what is it going to do to benefit, make companies more efficient, and then, just be better and more efficient and have a better prediction of demand and therefore less waste. That was where I was going to with
waste,
AI. So
food safety protocols.
Yeah, food safety, all these kind of things. So this article and your article particularly of this really opened kind of my thinking because I hadn't been thinking about it in that way. So it's really interesting.
So in terms of risk assessment, risk management, I think that AI can actually make wonders for the food industry. But at the same time, to me, what he's arguing is that perhaps we need to think about citizen engagement, like in terms of how do we make sure that AI does make our food supply chains more efficient while making sure that people are aware.
So we're just going to hear now with, let's bring on our regular reoccurring guest, Colleen Martin. She's going to tell us all about this fantastic research.
Well, for this show, we're happy to have back Colleen Martin from Caddle. Colleen, how you doing?
Hello. Great to be back,
how was
guys.
Your summer?
It was too long without you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we missed you. We missed you. We missed you.
I was lucky because I got an exclusive invitation to a amazing pizza party.
That's right. We had you out to the farm and we cooked you some authentic Italian pizza. Delicious. And you enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it immensely. And the only thing that was missing was Sylvain.
Exactly.
Well, I was in the Laurentians, and actually, I was in the Laurentians, and I was able to smell the pizza from where you were. It was great. But thank you for the invitation. I'm hoping next time I'll be able to make it.
Same. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, listen, so with this show, because of our partnership with Caddle, we kind of abuse Caddle with the knowledge that you have and all the beautiful data that you have, and we ask ourselves, Michael and I, different questions, and questions that I think our audience is asking in terms of what's going on in the wonderful world of food. And this week we want to explore the issue of online grocery shopping. And I know that, Colleen, I've seen you present on this issue. I've seen many reports from Caddle looking at this particular issue. So I guess I can ask you, so what are you guys seeing in terms of grocery shopping online? I mean, I know a lot of Canadians are still on the sidelines. They just can't do it. But it seems that a lot of people are starting to pay attention.
It's been the hottest topic, and I think there was an explosion around COVID, as you guys know. So we decided to put together a couple questions, and we asked 9,286 folks at the end of August there about their behavior regarding online grocery shopping. So overall adoption, 36.7% of respondents purchased groceries online in the past year. Adoption is relatively balanced between the genders, about 36.5 and 36.6 for females to male. Not surprising.
I find that kind of interesting, but kind of not. Like, because the kind of interesting is when I think of efficiency and getting things done in e-commerce, I think more of fellas. But then when I think of who's actually generally in charge of getting groceries, it's more women. Is that where you see that breakdown?
We did not ask that follow-up as to why, but yes, like there's usually household managers. And, if you have, speaking from experience, you've got our CEO Ransom is in charge of online groceries, and they have a list and they execute the list every week and they just add to it as they see, like they see a promotion or something like that. So it depends on how your chores are divided up essentially. But, the almost 50-50 split is surprising. I thought it would have been more heavily female, to be honest.
Really? No, I wasn't surprised. I was surprised with the next feature around age. And I know you have some data about that.
Yeah, so it's not surprising, though, that the younger generations are more likely to do it online. So 45.9% of Gen Z and 37.3% of millennials having done so. A notable generation gap. So look, 21.4% of baby boomers and obviously 0.1% of the greatest generation. Again, for like Gen Z is my generation X is kind of floating through this thing unnoticed, but there's a big gap in between the young and old and whether or not they're shopping online.
Here's where I'm coming from with generations. Younger generations tend to have less money. And it's been argued out there that shopping online will cost you more money. And I was expecting, yes, a higher percentage, but not more than double compared to, say, boomers. That's when I saw results, I was a bit surprised by the gap. Like, it's a really significant gap.
It depends, because I think that those younger generations, based on other studies we do with them, value their time more than they would, having to schlep across. Like if you think about Instacart, doing, 5 or 6 retailers in one shop would save you half a day on a weekend. And if I'm a younger generation and I want to go hike or do something with my friends and I value that more than shopping for groceries and paying 20% more, I'm going to do that.
And also, I mean, a lot of people are arguing, well, when I shop online, I actually save some money because I'm not a victim of impulse buying. I just buy what I need.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of list behavior happening when you're online shopping, because they haven't really, if I'm speaking candidly as a consumer, I don't think they've fixed the impulse part of the in-store shop online yet, like Amazon has with the would you recommend feature.
Interesting. And you also have some data around geography and different regions throughout the country.
So not surprisingly, again, online grocery shopping is most popular in urban areas, 37.5%, with rural uptake lower in and around the 30% range. Provincially, Ontario leads with 39.3%, while regions like Newfoundland and Labrador show lower adoption rates, which just makes sense regarding access to these services, right?
Your survey seems to suggest that Quebec is picking up its online game, if you will, because with, other survey field houses, I've actually seen Quebec struggling with online anything because the internet is typically an English world, and Quebecers have always struggled to basically operate and behave the same way as English folks, and so I was kind of surprised to see that Newfoundland is actually has a lower adoption, much lower than Quebec actually. So that's interesting.
It could be also they've gone on once, seen the price for delivery, and said they're not going to engage.
Oh, maybe.
Right? Like that's probably like we get into this to the barriers in the next part, but essentially it's my guess as to why it's lower adoption rates.
You've also looked into motivation. What motivates people to actually order online now?
100%. Like there's two: convenience and time saving make up to close to half as the primary reasons for the online grocery shopping. And we asked them like access to online only sales or deals and deliveries and avoiding the in-store crowd. What are the reasons why you're doing this? And by far, convenience and time saving are top two box. As you know, people are, if you have more than one kid, you're a taxi service and you have no time to do these things in between every event that these children are going to. So there are people, parents and families and households are turning to these time saving, especially like, the multiple retail shops in one, like Instacart is providing for the consumer.
I want to ask you, I mean, based on your experience and what you're seeing out there, I mean, are you seeing companies, grocers, retailers offering more deals online out there to get people to get hooked on online buying more so than, say, I don't know, 12 months ago? Are you seeing more activity there with discounts?
Gen Z is very sensitive to online deals. So you will see, like, obviously grocers are, I would say the traditional big three grocers, maybe Sobeys to a lesser extent, are struggling with their online experience. They don't have peer review. They don't have ratings and reviews for people to really decide whether or not a product's any good that they haven't tried before. But one thing they all have done well is creating online only deals. And this is something that is motivating and driving a lot of people to shop online to see if they can get a better deal on things. So 20.2% of respondents were motivated to access by access to online only deals.
Yeah. Which is pretty significant. Yeah.
It is, especially when you dig into the demographics, like the older generations, like the boomers, they value deals 46.6%, while millennials prioritize convenience and time saving, which makes sense in what we talked about in terms of core values. What do they value more? And when you look at respondents in remote areas, like the rural areas, they show higher reliance on online grocery shopping for convenience, 45.4%.
And the beauty of Caddle is that you actually do get data coming from the north, and you have some data about northern territories, eh? We
do. We have representation in all the provinces.
Yeah, and
even
so
the Yukon.
and the reliance on online grocery shopping up north is pretty darn high too.
Right, and they're paying for it, I'm sure, through the delivery fees, et cetera. But if there are establishments that buy in line, pick up on store, is path of least resistance. It's getting best of both worlds. You're getting the convenience of just putting in your shop and having it available for you to pick up with your car. So there's kind of a hybrid convenience going on there too.
And your survey also looked at barriers. What's pushing people away from online grocery shopping? Why
aren't they, right? So we asked all of the people who said no, they don't shop online in the last year. We asked them, why not? And number one with the bullet, preference for in-store selection at 39.5%, especially among the older generations, more than half, 50.7. So they were way statistically significantly leaning on, I want to touch and feel my stuff. And that's obviously produce, meat, bakery, right? And then additionally, nationally, 19.5% of respondents enjoy the physical shopping experience. They like getting out, the community, the eye contacts, these are,
And for some people, it's probably their
very
only
real.
social. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's a very real thing.
Yeah.
Like I live on a farm now. I don't live in the hustle and bustle of the city where I had all of these intrinsic kind of interactions with humans, but I look forward to leaving this property and having like these, and these, like I will shop now where I didn't before because I do enjoy kind of seeing what everyone's up to and like, hey, talking to people at the register. Like I am now an old person who enjoys having a conversation with a cashier.
Well, this is such an interesting question because it was really, when Sylvain and I kind of were wondering about e-commerce, one of the things that prompted this was, Voilà was kind of rolling back their service. Now, when we talk about cost, which sometimes gets to be the number one stated, sometimes the assumption is that's the number one barrier. I didn't think it was the case because if you think of from Amazon to Costco, you can buy annual services, Voilà, whoever, you can buy an annual fee for a small amount of money, you can have free delivery. So it didn't seem to me that cost was the biggest barrier. Now, if you use an Instacart at $12 a pop or whatever, sure. But I think that's what, in my mind, this research really validated. I mean, if you take a look at the preference for in-store shopping, add in, I actually like to shop, add in, well, I got to do something with the kids anyway. That was our case when our kids were little. Let's go to the shop, let's go, socialize, a little bit, or get them socialized, get them off their devices. It wasn't a bad idea. Now, it is the case that delivery fees does come up. Of course, fees always come up. So talk about that a little bit.
So that was the third barrier. So 13.2% of Canadians said that delivery fees was the barrier to doing that. And, you mentioned Amazon, you mentioned, companies that you can buy a subscription and you get free delivery, but this is not happening fast enough in our traditional big three Canadian grocers. Like there is very little outside of loyalty programs. There's really very little innovation happening around engagement in this area specifically. So, this is a great call out to those companies to really look at how they can offer free delivery and, potentially bake in those costs and like a membership fee, whatever it may be, or, have them, the more they shop through their loyalty program, they get discounts off delivery to help convert. But delivery fees and product quality was the next one in terms of being significant barriers.
Mm-hmm. Now, you do have some industry insights and trends to provide in terms of people listening in. They want to know, okay, what does this all mean? So this survey was conducted a few weeks ago. So we took a picture of what's going on right now. So what does this all mean?
We asked the folks who do not shop online if those improvements, better PDP pages showing quality, improvement in product quality, or guarantees around product quality. Voilà did the best job of that by eliminating that midpoint where it was going. It was straight to the consumer from the DC. So people started buying into the produce being a better quality by the time it reached them. If they could improve those things, then they could have more adoption. So when we asked if all of those things that are barriers to you were improved, we had 10.9% of those folks, which are 5,800 people, said that they would shop weekly online. 10.9% said they would shop biweekly. And then another 11.6% said they would shop monthly. So these are, again, cognitive dissonance, say versus do, but if those things were fixed, I think delivery would be, and, just having more selection or a better way to interact with the product using better PDP or 3D or whatever it may be, to kind of to remove that friction. I think you definitely would see better adoption. And that led us to kind of distill all this information and understand, okay, what are the things that will really help bolster this and get better adoption? So digital and urban expansion, higher adoption in urban areas and among younger consumers suggests that retailers should focus on digital strategies and partnerships with delivery services to expand online offerings, like you see what PetSmart did there with DoorDash, et cetera. So taking that model and really looking at how to customize that for your own business and blowing that up to make sure that you're getting those millennials and Gen Zs in your store and staying loyal to those stores, which is the overall issue right now. On the second matter, customer experience and incentives. So to drive adoption among older demographics, reducing the delivery costs and ensuring transparent quality assurance can help. Furthermore, exclusive deals and targeted marketing campaigns focusing on convenience and time saving could attract more urban consumers. So that would really help build penetration there up from that 36%. And that last one, which we didn't really touch on, and there was a lot of urban versus rural, significantly different
There's a divide.
answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
The lower adoption in rural areas indicates that there's a major opportunity for grocery providers to expand their online services, improving accessibility and delivery options.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a smaller market, but still, it's a market that certainly has potential for sure. Any major takeaways at a high level coming from this survey, Colleen?
So those were the three main takeaways, and just making sure that it's really hard to be everything to everyone. But when you see data like this, where you see some really low hanging fruit, like addressing the delivery issue, the product quality issue, and giving them a better experience online and helping fill that basket and make it a profitable basket. Are really things that we should be paying attention to.
So people who think, well, there was a COVID bump with online purchasing and the grocery business has benefited from that, and now we may have peaked. Do you think that we did peak and things are slowing down, or is there room for growth over the next 3 to 5 years?
So pre-COVID, it was single digits, and I would hesitate. I would even say low single digits online grocery. And I think Grocery Gateway was the really only major thing that had been around they were kind of pioneers in the market. And COVID, we've done a ton of research during COVID. We even had an experience tracker to see how many people, and I think it was close to 70-80% during COVID. People were shopping online because they were afraid to go to the store. So there was fear there. It was a fear-driven adoption rate. But post-COVID, it's now kind of settling in that 30 to 36% adoption. And that's not, if you were to take COVID out of the mix and say from 2019 to today, it went from 4% to 36%. That's damn good growth. So it's, whatever made it happen, it's good enough to make 36% of the folks stick to it. And how do you, if this is something that I believe that retailers should prioritize based on how the younger generations expect to be interacting with them, they really need to address that digital experience and all of those things we spoke about in order to be relevant to them going forward. Yes, so Nick, it's important to have a no frills and a new channel of discount grocery to compete with dollar, but it's also important to make the experience consistent across all and digitally across all those banners.
Interesting. So Nick actually, as you know, they publish a report every quarter. And they do claim that that online grocery shopping peaked in 2022 at 3.6% of all food sales. 3.6% was done online in 2022. They claim it peaked. You're not buying it, are you?
I don't know. It doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem that you're buying it.
Doesn't seem right.
And I don't buy it either. To be honest, I actually think there's room for, there are tremendous opportunities out there that have been unexplored.
Especially with the habits and behaviors of these younger generations. It's not going away.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going anywhere. You need to optimize for what
frankly,
these people are looking for.
The big takeaway to me is the fact that the younger generations are buying online, and they're going to grow older, and habits are hard to break, and they're going to continue to buy online probably, and that volume will carry on with them as they grow older, and they'll be more economically influential, and they'll spend more money online. That's what I'm getting from your survey.
Thank you again for doing this survey, and tell us a little bit before you go about where people can see a summary perhaps, or get in touch with Caddle.
Anywhere that you have listened to this podcast, there should be links in order. We give all of this information away free to everyone. You can always reach out to me, colleen.martin@caddle.ca. Happy to answer any questions, give you the data if you need it. You can find me on LinkedIn, all sorts of places.
Fantastic. Well, Colleen, thanks for joining us this month. Next month, we're going to do a tricky one. We're getting involved in something we were talking off mic that's tricky from a technical perspective, asking people if they really care anymore about sustainability and to what degree. And people don't always tell the truth in these surveys. So we're going to have
the market currency of sustainability.
Yeah. So we're going to get at that, talk about local, all coming up next month when you're back. Thanks again for the great research. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.
Thanks, guys.
Last couple of quick things. First of all, Molson Coors. Let's talk about DE&I. We're seeing some kind of pullback. Molson Coors being one of the latest, but there's been some others. John Deere. Who else? Lowe's.
Harley Davidson.
Company. Harley Davidson. And some of it, kind of beyond the scope of this discussion, but some of it is driven by unusual actors who kind of get everybody ginned up on online and go after them. But
That's
what
right.
do you think is...
We're often referred to as the woke movement.
Well, and certain actors kind of get everybody all geared up. Now, what do you think this all means for someone like a beer company? Do you think it... Because we've also heard this from, I think, Nestle, right? Who's under attack from some of their stakeholders saying, we think all this stuff is not, A, growing sales, B, is less important than you think it is to consumers, back to our discussion, and C, we don't understand it. Others, like a Mark Cuban, would say, listen, the business case for diversity is quite clear and quite pervasive and quite persuasive. So what are you thinking about all this?
Well, I mean, I'm an academic, so I work at a university, and EDI is huge. I mean, it's everything, and of course, whenever we think about hiring, whenever we think about, we have to, click boxes, making sure that everyone works in a safe place, that there's no bias, or at least you limit the amount of bias, racism, and all these problems are absolutely real. But the thing about the corporate sector is that you can go bankrupt. Universities can't go bankrupt, but companies can go bankrupt, and it's about branding. It's about increasing sales and all that. And I think that when I saw John Deere's decision this summer and Molson Coors now, what I saw were companies redefining what EDI actually means in the corporate sector, I think. I call it beyond wokeness, or wokeness 2.0, if you will, because I think these issues are pretty darn important.
Yeah.
I mean, and not going to go, especially in the food industry. Let's face it. I mean, in the food industry, Michael, there's a lot of companies. It's all white guys. It's dominated by white guys. If you look at, for example, some people who have been appointed to the Hall of Fame recently. I mean, you look at some. It shows you. I mean, this is our history, right? And all these people have made some tremendous contribution, but they came from a different generation, and now EDI is way more important. But Molson Coors, I think, is just redefining how you prioritize these issues, and it's not just about clicking boxes. It's not just about appointing someone in HR to oversee issues related to transgenders, for example, or hiring someone to look at other issues, for example. It's really about embracing a culture of diversity and inclusiveness as a corporation. I think that's the message that I got from Molson Coors, which is really interesting. So they're looking at EDI through an efficiency lens. That's kind of what I got from the announcement.
Interesting. EDI 2.0, basically. I like
EDI
that.
2.0, absolutely.
Yeah,
and so
I like that phrase.
Public institutions like us, like university, we're not forced to think that way, but companies are forced to think that way because they're competing. They're competing and they need to sell. They need to grow. So how do you actually make sure that you do that? You remain inclusive and diverse as you're trying to grow and do better. That's not an easy balance.
No, that's a difficult balance for sure.
I think it's important that we appreciate what these companies are doing. It's not just about pushing aside a very important issue. It's about looking at this issue very differently.
Now, we got some numbers coming out of Ontario that are pretty disturbing. 1 million Ontarians went to a food bank in the last 12 months. Now, what are we seeing?
Were you surprised?
Well,
it's your province.
I wasn't surprised. I was looking at unemployment rates for youth, 15 to 24, in the GTA. It was 18%. Yeah. These double-digit numbers, like the mask of 6% is one thing, but when you drill down, there's a lot of people really struggling. We've got temporary foreign workers. We've got these students who are coming in now are going to get kicked out. Like the number, 1 million people, though, man. Like. You're deeply involved. You're on the board of the food bank, and were you shocked by this? Or you're like, yep, this is where it's going. And what do you attribute this to? Is it too many people chasing after too few dollars, too few jobs, or what's going on?
It's disturbing, and frankly, when I saw that number, I tried to find new data to see what's going on, and I often try to compare Canada with the U.S. And frankly, I actually don't understand why Trump is so popular versus Harris. I mean, she's kind of the incumbent, and the economy in America is doing very well. I mean, very well. But I actually started to look at food insecurity levels, U.S. versus Canada. So in America. We have 13.5% of Americans that are food insecure. So whether it's low or very low food security. So 13.5%. Do you know what it is in Canada? 22.9%. That's a lot more. So a lot more people are actually food insecure in Canada. I also looked at food sales in Canada. Food sales in Canada are down 3.2% since last year. In America, up 1.8%. GDP per capita, down in Canada, 4% versus the U.S. where it's growing.
Let's talk about that food sales thing, because we've talked about that I saw Dollarama's numbers were up 7%. We know that there's more food being sold in more alternative locations like a Dollarama or even on an Amazon that aren't tracked to the food thing. Do you think that's a contributor to those numbers?
It's one of them, but I honestly think the bottom line is that there's little wealth creation in Canada, and people are getting poorer, and in that report, that Feed Ontario report this week, they did claim that a lot of people go to food banks and they are working, they have full-time jobs, and here's the thing between Canada and the U.S. And as if you saw the debate last night, they did talk about tariffs and inflation, and I don't believe Mr. Trump for a second. When you put in tariffs on stuff, anything, it will inflate prices domestically. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. That's always the case.
It's net inflationary. Always.
And with the Fed, when they actually raise rates, it will impact inflation, of course. And it's the same in Canada. The thing about Canada versus the U.S. is that our wiggle room is much more narrow than the U.S. because Canadians are highly in debt. And we don't earn as much. And there are a lot of union jobs in Canada. And so collective agreements aren't negotiated as quickly as what you see in the U.S., where typically revenues or wages are adjusted based on the cost of living a little bit more fast, a little faster than in Canada. But I think the big issue in Canada is that we have a lot of debt. A lot of people have personal debt. And of course, we don't manufacture as much. And when you manufacture products in Canada, no matter what sector it is, you tend to have an industry able to absorb shocks like tariffs and higher energy costs and things like that. In Canada, we don't have that luxury. And that's why whenever there's a macroeconomic earthquake of some sort, Canada is more impacted than the US. So when we have a spat with China and we slap tariffs for EVs and they actually rebut by doing something else, we get hit in Canada to a greater degree than in the US if they actually retaliate against the US. And I think it's underappreciated. So we're much more vulnerable. And you see that in the data. And I think that the people going to food banks are the victims. That's the picture you're getting in terms of how our economy can cope with shockwaves.
Interesting. I love how you tie all that together, because there's a bunch of strands there that we've been talking about. You've tied it together nicely. So
that's great, because we'll have an exam at the end of the show.
Yeah.
You have to pay tuition.
Let's end on a positive note. So particularly positive for anybody who likes Cheddar Bay biscuits or endless baskets of shrimp. Red Lobster's looks like it's secure. As of this week, it's been approved to come out of bankruptcy. So there'll be 27 restaurants in Canada, 544 in North America. So employs a couple 2,000 people in Canada. So Red Lobster is undead. So
undead
it is back
for Ontario.
And I'll put a link in the show notes. There's just a
Ontario and the prairies, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, Ontario, Manitoba. Ontario and the prairies. Yeah. Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Yeah. All right. Well, lots of interesting stuff on this episode. Let's wrap it up here. Lots more to talk about. I want to talk next episode. I want to talk more about Starbucks, because their new CEO is saying a few things, and so let's let that air out. Some good numbers coming out of their traffic driver. The pumpkin spice continues to be as much as we can mock it, continues to be a big traffic driver for Starbucks. So we'll get some numbers. Get some numbers about that.
Rhubarb and ginger.
Until then, I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur, consultant, advisor, and a bunch of other things. And you are?
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels for everyone who's going to try and travel on Air Canada this week.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Yeah. Take care.